Hello everyone, it's Natasha from Treasure Books. I often see a question asked on Facebook and YouTube and even on my videos. What do you do first? Do you do the cover first and then your signatures? Or do you do the signatures first and then your cover? Do you embellish the pages first and then bind them into your journal? Or do you bind first and then embellish? So in this video, I have the steps here. I'm going to go through the steps that I personally follow when making a journal, and I always follow the same sequence. So this video is about the sequence. I'm not going to be teaching a specific thing. We are going to be going through the sequence. I will be making this journal in this video step by step, so you will see me make it. I will be speeding up through the process because once again the video is about the sequence and not a particular way of doing things. So I'm hoping that this video will be useful for you guys in terms of where to begin and what steps to follow. So let's begin. Right, so the very first thing that I think about before making a journal is what is going to be my cover. So the options here obviously can go on and on and on, from cereal boxes to old books, constructing your own covers and all sorts of things. So, but in this video I just want to go through the steps. That's our major things. So I think about what cover am I going to use, and I decided I'm going to use this, the cover from an old notebook, and it actually looks pretty good on its own, just like this, but there's some writing here at the back which I don't like. So I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, what do I want to do with it? You know, it's quite sturdy but not sturdy enough for my liking. So I'm thinking I want to reinforce it somehow, and truth be told, I really want to cover this, but I think it's going to be stupid if I just cover this, just that. So I decided to actually cover the whole thing but leave some edges like that. So that's my decision-making process basically. I think this adding an extra piece of scrapbook paper is going to make it sturdier. I'm not going to use any fabric. I'm only going to use paper. I'm going to sew around here, not onto the cover, so there won't be any sewing on the inside. I'm thinking, do I need to reinforce the inside of my cover? If I do reinforce in here, sometimes I use masking tape to reinforce. I'll just put a layer of masking tape. But if I do that with this cover, it means that I will have to cover the inside too with some scrapbook paper, because masking tape just sitting there, it's not going to look great. So I decided I'm not going to reinforce that. I'm going to leave the inside just as it is. I might just ink the edges so it's not so white. At this point, I also think about the closure, because if I want to have a ribbon sitting between these two layers, for example, that will act as my closure, I have to add that ribbon. I have to glue it onto the cover before gluing this piece on, and that's why closure is the very second thing I start to think about before even starting on the journal. So I think in this case, I am just going to add some eyelets and add some ribbon through the eyelets, which means that I'm going to do that after I have attached this part, and then I'm going to poke a hole there to include some eyelets and some ribbon. All right, so I'm going to go and do this step now, attach this part, and then after I have done that, I'm going to want to glue something on here. I want to ink the edges a little bit because everything seems so bright, so just a tiny little bit. Alright, so I have somewhat prepared my little pieces that are going to be glued on. I have decided that I am going to embellish the front cover. I'm going to obviously put something more on there, so I'm going to leave that, but the back cover I'm going to use just like this. I'm not going to do anything extra to it apart from just a little bit of sewing, just to add a little bit of something extra. So before I do sewing, I am going to apply this varnish to this paper, because it's not something that you have to do, but you know, there'll be a lot of dragging of this on the surface, you know, when you're using it, writing it, carrying it, stuff like that. So I just sometimes like to apply a little bit of something. So this is just a varnish to protect paintings and such, but it just adds an extra layer of some sort of a protectant, I guess. There are many different things that you can use, or sealers, I guess. I also have this one. I just sort of buy things that I come across that are good price. So obviously I use this one outside. All of them I use outside. So this one's a sealer. So anything that can seal a purpose, I guess. And then things like this, glue and seal. Multi-purpose glue and sealer. So I don't know, maybe even PVA. Just straight PVA glue might act as a sealer. I'm not sure. So that's what I'm going to do. And I'll do that now. And then I'm going to add some sewing. Okay, I've sprayed the back piece, and now with this piece I'm going to go ahead and embellish it, and I'm not going to go through the process because this is about steps. Actually, might as well just walk through the process. I did a bit of stitching around there, and then I decided I'm going to add this little sort of thing at the front and a book page just to make it stand out a little bit more. But I want to do some more sewing, so that's what I'm going to do. Okay, so here we go. I just added some stitching here and stitching here. Just 3 simple little pieces put together, and we're doing simple today, so I am happy with this to be my cover. So the next thing I'm going to do is glue this on my spine, on my book. Alright, I've prepared my back cover too. That's been sealed. So now I'm going to glue it on. Okay, so that's my cover semi-ready. The next thing I'm going to do, I'm just going to let this dry for a little bit. Alright, so now I'm going to add my eyelets, but I will not be adding the ribbon yet, or whatever I'll use as a closure, because it will be in my way when I'm binding the journal. At this point, I also decide if I want a tassel, and I'm thinking I might have a little tassel here, but it can't be anything heavy because this hasn't been reinforced, so I don't want anything heavy, but I'm definitely going to make a hole here as well. And then that's ready for me. As the last step, I will add those things. Okay, so I'm using my silent setter. I don't have a crocodile. I have this that I purchased on eBay to add my holes and the eyelets. Okay, so I have added the eyelets, and now I just want to add a little bit of inking on the inside, just so it's got some sort of an edge and it's not so white. I might even do some stenciling on this a little bit later. I'll see how I feel, or maybe I'll do it now. Okay, so I am quite happy with that, and I now consider this cover finished until later on when I have to add the closure. But for now, I'm leaving it the way it is. And now, at this point, I decide on my papers for inside my book, what I'm going to use and so on. So the first thing that I do, I always do this. I don't know if it's something that has to be done, but I just like to do it. So I make a template for my signatures so that I always know how large my pages need to be. I use some type of a cardstock if you can find. It's just easier to work with cardstock, I think, rather than flimsy paper. And I use like covers from magazines, or this was some sort of a thing that I received somehow in the mail, I think. And so what I do, I will just, so I've got my piece of cardstock, and now I just want to use, this will be my guide, and this actually ends up being almost perfect. So let's see, I need my papers because I always like to leave a little bit of a gap up here and a little bit of a gap down the bottom. So I always want my cover to be slightly larger than my signatures, just so that my papers inside are fully protected on all sides, and it gives you a little bit of room for error when binding. If by accident you get your measurements wrong and then you have your signature sitting higher than it should, at least it's not sticking out of the book. All right, so I know that this is hard to see, so maybe I'll turn it around. I do it obviously from the inside, but I'm just going to turn it around so that you can see what I'm doing. Okay, so now I'm going to mark my template. I can see here that it's larger than my cover, so I'm going to mark where I'm going to cut it, and then the same thing on the inside. So I'm moving it all the way to this to the crease of my spine. So let's do it like this. Okay, so I moved it all the way in, and I can see that I have a little bit of space here, but I just want to make it even just a fraction shorter. Okay, so here is my template. In this instance, it's not ideal that it's got these perforations here, but it will do. It will do. So this is how large I need my pages to be in my signature. And the reason why this is helpful is because now I can see straight away if this page is going to fit, and no, it's not. It means I need to trim down the height. So next thing, before I continue on with anything else, I've got my template, and now I'm going to go and choose the papers that I'm going to use for my journal. So this is where you decide what kind of paper you want to use, how many pages you want to have in your journal. Obviously you will decide from having your cover. So clearly I can only have one signature in this journal, and I can't have too many pages because then it might, you know, I don't have enough room here in my spine to have a lot of pages, and plus we're making a simple journal today. So I went ahead and I have chosen a number of different things. So I'll just show you what I have chosen. I've got some tea dyed paper here. I've got some scrapbook paper. I've got some other specialty paper like coloring pages. I have a doily. I have a book, a paper bag. I have an envelope. And that's what I have chosen for this journal. So an assortment of different things. And I wanted to make sure that obviously there's a lot of room for writing as well. Okay, so now this is when my template comes in handy. So I am going to leave all of these pages here. I know I don't have to do anything with this one because I know it's going to fit. This one here, I want to trim this off anyway. So I'm just going to check against my template. My template is larger, so I'm going to trim that off anyway. So before even placing things into signatures, I go through and do what needs to be done, or trim off. I don't want this in my journal. I generally don't like a lot of book pages or magazine pages and writing things in a journal. So that's just a personal preference. Envelope, I'll do later. I'll get my paper bag. I want to check if it fits. Just so I know that we won't be cutting off top and bottom. I want to do get my doily ready. Fits just. So with this one, okay, this is where the template comes in handy. With this one, I want to make a pocket. So what I'm going to do, let's see if I've got enough space to make a pocket. Actually, I don't have enough. I only have. So what I'm going to do is maybe just make it shorter on one side. Get my template. And that's where I'm going to fold my pocket. So that's ready. This one I'm going to do another pocket, but maybe on the other side. So when I put it in, I'll have one pocket on this side, and then this one will be a pocket on this side. It all makes sense. And now my tea dye papers, I'm going to put them, fold them in half, get them ready. Okay, so I have got my pages ready, and usually when I'm making a journal, I will have a lot more than this, and I put them into piles of writing paper, scrapbook paper, specialty little things, or specialty paper, extras, I guess, I don't know, I'm just making up names as I go, and then my book pages here. And then I start pulling out from piles. So let's say I want this one to be, no, I want this one to be my front page, and then this one. And now I'm just going to place them into the order that I want them to be in. So, you know, I'm just putting them in randomly, but not so randomly. But I don't want, for example, two scrapbook papers one next to the other, and you know, so I have, they're all different as you're flipping through. Okay, so I have decided on my pages, and now here's my cover, and as you will see now, there's a little bit poking out up the top and on the sides, and this is where my template comes in. So now what I do, I just put it on top like this, and then trim whatever is sticking out of my template. So here we go. This is where I guess you want to make sure that, you know, you're not going to trim your bag and open pockets and things like that. So first I'm going to do this side here. So I put my template all the way to the spine, because what happens is you always have these middle pages in the pages that are right in the middle of the signature stick out the most. And now I have a nice straight edge here, so I just want to make sure that I'm not going to grab any of the things I don't want to cut. So I'm actually going to take this out because it's perfect fit, and I don't want to make a mistake and cut the top of my bag. And then another perfect fit was this doily, so I'm going to take it out and put it in later, and all of the other things are fine. So, and to be honest with you, because I usually have a lot more pages in a journal, I don't usually make little journals like this or thin journals like this. I won't be cutting them all in bulk as I'm doing now, so I'll explain that in a moment. Okay, so if I was making a journal with a lot more pages, I wouldn't cut them in bulk as I am now. So what I would do is, as I'm preparing my pages, so for example, once I've prepared my 3 or however many, 5 tea-dyed papers, I will then cut them straight away, you know, using my template, cut them, and then place them into signature. But because this is such a tiny little journal with not many pages, I place them all into signature and then trim down using my template. So now I just have to put these 2 back, and there we go. It fits perfectly into my cover. Okay, so now we have completed the template, we've done the signatures. So all of my pages that I want to include in this journal are ready to go. And now I am going to go on to pre-binding decorations. So the reason why I do, you know, this is another question I see often. Do you embellish your journal, your pages first and then bind? Or do you bind and then embellish? I do both. So the things that you cannot do once your journal is bound, I do them prior to binding. Things such as sewing, stamping, stenciling, and you know, stamping and stenciling and probably even sewing, you probably could do it after binding, but it's just more difficult, especially if you have a chunky journal with embellishments all throughout. You're trying to stamp, you can't get your image properly onto the page because you've got bulk underneath. So, and same with stenciling. Like I like to have, when I'm stenciling, when I'm stamping, whatever, I like to have a nice flat surface underneath. So this is just the way that I do it. It's not the way that you have to do it, but it's just the way that I do it. So at this stage now, I'm going to go through my journal and look at things and decide what needs to be done now. So for example, here, I know that I have a pocket on this side, and you know, it's up to you. I can definitely glue it down, but I like to do a lot of sewing in my journal. So I'm going to go ahead and do all of the sewing that I want to do in this journal, all of the stamping that I want to do, and all of the stenciling. I'm going to do it off camera and come back to show you exactly what I've done. Okay, so I've done all of my pre-binding decoration. I'll just go through with what I've done. By the way, I added one here, inking the edges. I like to ink all of the edges that I'm going to ink prior to the binding. So I will take out the page, let's say, I don't know, this one, and I will go ahead and ink the edges. And that way it's done and it's easier to do before they're actually bound into the box. So, okay, so this is what I did. I did some sewing around the edges. I did some inking. I've got some stenciling, some inking around the edges, inking here. Then I've sewn this envelope that you might have seen before when I was choosing my pages. So I've just sewn the flap here. So this is going to be a little tuck, and then this opens up here. It's all sewn in, and then that's a pocket there. I haven't done anything with these. I've done sewing here, and this is a pocket here that's sewn, a little stamp, sewing here, just some wiggly lines to sew, some inking, stenciling on this page, and then this is the back of all of the pages that I did. Sewing, stamping. Now that that's done, we are ready for the next step. At the end of the video, I'll give you an opportunity to screenshot these one next to the other. Okay, so the next thing that I do is binding or sewing in the signatures into my book. So at this point, I usually like to make myself a template, or you can use this template because it's perfect when you're marking your, how you're going to sew this in. So I am just going to find my middle, and then 2 points here, and I'm going to mark where I will poke the holes. Now first I'm going to mark these points on my spine, especially important if you have more than one signature. I will be doing a simple 3 pamphlet stitch, so I just need the 3 holes. And now I have to poke my holes in my signature here. So I just want to make sure that all of my pages are sitting where I want them to. Make sure everything is nice and snug. And now I'm going to use my template here to poke the holes. Take this out, I don't want to sew that in. Okay, I have my thread on my needle, and now we're ready to bind. So I'm going to go, I'll leave this in just so it's holding it all in place. I start here from the middle. And here we go. So this isn't a tutorial on binding, which is why I've sped through this process. Tie a little knot here, and everything's bound. Everything is within the cover. No pages sticking out anywhere, which is what I wanted. And now my next step is final decoration of the journal post binding. So I will be going and filling up pockets and putting little embellishments on and clipping in journaling spots and, doing all of those little final touches. And then at the end, I'm going to add my tassel and my closure. Alright, so I have filled up all of my pockets, added embellishments, so I'll just go through and show you what I've done. I've got a pocket here right on the first page and a journaling spot, so it's also a tuck there. So basically I went through my stash of things that are already pre-made, and that way this process is a lot quicker. So I do have a playlist on making your own ephemera for junk journals, and if you wanted to go and have a look. And I like to make things in advance so I can just put them into the pockets, or so I can embellish my journal quickly rather than having to stop and think each time. So I have a little journaling spot in here in this little tuck. I think that goes really pretty. And then over here I've just added some journaling space, and then here this opens up. I didn't put too much thought into it. I just worked quickly so I can, you know, the purpose of this video is to see the steps and the sequence. I have a tutorial on making these, so everything that I've mentioned I will link down below so you can have a look. This is a wraparound flip open envelope. I've also got a tutorial on these. These are spray painted Hawaiian lei flowers. You know those cheap Hawaiian necklaces? I spray painted the flowers, so I'll link that below as well. So didn't do much on these ones here. Then here I just clipped in this. This was a leftover from a project, and it's journaling space. So that's just clipped in on this page, and I have added just a little charm here. I also have a video of having your book jewelry things ready to go. I'll link that down below as well. A little cluster here. So all of these things I already had in my stash. They were all pre-made, and all I had to do is just put them in, glue them on. This is that paper bag, and I just filled it up with, you know, just bits and pieces. More writing space, I guess. You can put anything you like in your pockets. Stenciling. And in this very last pocket, I just put some a tag and a journaling spot. And that's it. So I've kept it simple. So now the final two steps that I've got to do is to add my tassel here and to add my closure. Okay, so I just want to do, because these holes are quite small, I need to use something that can go through basically. So this ribbon is quite dainty and feminine, but let's see how it's going to look. When it's tied there, I think it's going to look okay. And then I just went into my stash again. I have some ready-made little tassel things. You can see that in that video, book jewelry. So I just want to see if this will work. I'm not sure that I'm happy with how this sits, so I don't like that. So this isn't going to work. Okay, this is what I decided to do. I decided I'm just going to loop through a couple of ribbons and keep it simple and maybe add some beads. Alright, so here's my tassel, and I like this. It can be moved up out of the way. It's not in your way when writing. That's why I didn't like that. I was trying with bob pins and such, and they weren't able to be moved up and down very easily like this one. So I'm sticking with that. And now I need to do my closure. So I'm just going to loop this through. And now I'm going to do the same on the other side. And let's see how it all looks. Here is my complete journal. I'm quite happy with how it turned out. These are generally not the colors that I would use, but I really wanted to use up that cover that I had sitting around. I do have a couple more actually, and this is what I ended up with. So the purpose of this video was to show you the steps that I follow when making junk journals. I'm going to put the steps side by side now so that you can take a screenshot if you would like. And here we go. So there are many different ways of making a journal. I'm hoping that this video and these notes will give you some guidance. It's not something that you must stick by. It's just my way of doing things that I wanted to share with you. So hopefully you find it helpful. Thank you so much for being here today, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!